Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. Today I'll be going through the Persistent Universe Monthly Report, breaking down all the need to know. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you all so much for the support, and if you do appreciate my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. Now this is going to be quite a long video, so do get some snacks, get a drink, and settle in. So, starting with the animation team, they developed various facial animations for emotes and background characters, including the female vendor. The character art team kicked off production on the Frontier environmental wear and polished the Frontier undersuits, plus character concept explored the Rough and Ready gang, Fauna, and the Dusters faction. So this Rough and Ready gang, we have actually seen, I think, some of their logos dotted around different environments, like on outposts, during Inside Star Citizen's sort of look dev stuff. I do wonder if these are a Stanton faction, or maybe set for Pyro. We will have to wait and see, but also it is great to hear more is happening for Fauna. It does sound like there's quite a big push now to get creatures and animals in the game. We are yet to properly see any in action or in engine, but I'm hoping it's not going to be too long till they do a little reveal. Now next up we have the ship art team. It says they continued work on a small ship mentioned in last month's report, with certain elements reaching level of detail complete, and they began exploring ideas for a variant. Not sure what that is. The Argo SRV progressed through final art, with its final polish currently underway on its exterior before the level of detail and damage passes begin. Its interior continued through final art and received a level of detail pass as well. Now this is going to be a great ship, especially for cleaning up debris and when ships suffer soft death. I do wonder when it's coming though, maybe 3.19, perhaps maybe a little after, but it does talk about some actual gameplay for the Argo SRV later on in this report, so do stick around. Now, development on the Crusader Spirit continued, which just passed its white box review, with the A1 variant moving into the grey box phase, and the A1 being the bomber variant, with the team saying the exterior is shaping up nicely with the keyforms all established and all major elements like the landing gear and VTOLs resolved. The interior is coming along and we're very pleased with the space so far, although there are a few visual changes they'd like to make to the doorways just to emphasise Crusader's visual language. So it does sound like the Spirit range is coming along very nicely. Not an owner, but they do look kind of cool. Now it also says a previously unannounced ground vehicle passed its grey box sanity review before the artwork progressed to level of detail 0, with exterior almost finalised, only requiring additional detail, and the interior is progressing well. Again, not sure what this is. I really hope to see a ground salvaging vehicle. I think that would be such a cool option, but we will have to wait and see. It could be a racing vehicle, who knows. The US team completed art white box for another in-production vehicle, which passed on to the systems design team. Grey box began on another ship, with half the team focused on the main fuselage geometry, while the others prototyped a new way to enter and exit the ship. Sounds interesting. Could be Alien, maybe. I think, when's Alien Week? I know that's sometime in the year. And finally, 4 ships. And all new vehicle entered grey box, and a new set of alien paints was created for a future release. So quite a lot of ships and vehicles in production. 1 small ship, a ground vehicle, another ship finishing white box, 2 starting grey box, so that's about 5 new ships, plus the Spirit and SRV. Whether or not any of these are relating to the new Scorpius variant with the EMP, I don't know, but we will see. Now, onto the engine team, and a big thank you to a member of my community called the Tomato King for providing some great explanations to the engine team's work, as most of it goes way over my head. So, triangle vertex and normal transforms for physics triangle meshes were rewritten to use SSE/AVX, which saves 30% of the cost, and basically this allows the CPU core to run the same instruction on multiple pieces of data at the same time. The physicalization method for ropes can now be chosen per rope entity. Still very interested to see just what they have planned for ropes and where they can utilize that in the PU. Hopefully for climbing, that would be amazing. Now for the renderer, various optimizations were implemented into Gen 12, and among other things, this included performance improvements for transient lists, recording draw requests, a special submission for scene rendering with reduced thread synchronization, and a reduction of calls into the PS for general multi-threading purposes. So thread synchronization is when a thread has to wait for another thread to complete its work, so just basically reducing that time, it seems. The renderer initialization was refactored to prepare for Vulkan, and last month's Gen 12 support for particle refraction now works as intended. For the core engine side of things, further improvements were made to the remote shader compiler, with last month's work adding support for huge pages being rolled out internally, and huge pages are now also used within the low-level memory allocator. And basically, huge pages decrease overhead when accessing large things in RAM, and the memory allocator manages the memory for the process, so reserving new memory and releasing unused memory. And finally, to further reduce the executable size of the Linux dedicated game server, the gold linker is now utilized to fold identical functions and various compiler-generated data inside binaries, which is basically a linker for Linux programs to merge different parts of another program into a single file, and usually applies to optimizations such as removing unused functions. So again, thank you Tomato King, very much appreciate that, because as I say, without those explanations, I would have no idea what they're talking about. Now on to the Arena Commander features team, who we met recently on Inside Star Citizen. They spent the month polishing the new Arena Commander front end and racing tracks, placing the new Horizon Speedway tracks above a new planet being Green 3 of the Ellis system, not just Microtech as people seem to think, adjusting these tracks to suit the new Earth-like atmosphere. All of this we actually saw on Inside Star Citizen recently, so thankfully there is a bit of B-roll for you. Work also continued on the Classic Race Refactor, with the first version of the new race manager and checkpoint setups being tested and feedback addressed. Also, optimizations and additions such as splits, qualifying and new analytical data were made, alongside improvements to time accuracy. So really happy to hear that they're getting more, or much more, of the standard race functionality implemented, as this will add to the overall racing dynamic and gameplay, not just providing time trials but having multiple races per race. Now, the refactors of both the rounds and spawning modules continued across Arena Commander and Star Marine, and this refactor sees the code drastically improved and brought up to the current standard, while providing more modularity for new features. And as we also heard on the Inside Star Citizen, much of Arena Commander's code has been untouched since its release, and it was literally all legacy. So now that they're replacing all that, it gives them the freedom to actually add more to Arena Commander while simultaneously keeping up performance and keeping it all fresh. Now onto the characters and weapon features team. This team worked on the player skills feature, which basically tracks certain player activities and actions with minimal hooks into the gameplay feature logic, with an emphasis on performance. And from the data and events gathered, players can now improve certain aspects of their performance. For example, a player with a higher level of fitness may have more stamina or consume stamina at a slower rate. Now this I am very much looking forward to seeing roll out, allowing us to expand our characters' abilities in kind of a underlying system that will feel like our characters are growing and learning almost. An interesting concept that will certainly need to be watched closely to ensure that it doesn't branch into the skill element of Star Citizen, but I do like this San Andreas style character development. Now the team have also been working on better support for the player, playing animations triggered by environmental interactions, such as a character physically opening a locker door or pressing a button on a vehicle dashboard. And it says that these are going to be either quick or decorative action sequences with a large focus on reusability so that they can scale it with the amount of planned content, although they say it will require a lot of balancing to ensure that it increases immersion with minimal impact on responsiveness. Now this has been quite a long time in the works, and basically enables the player's hands to reach out and look like we are physically interacting with all aspects of the environment. And I'm very glad that they mentioned that it must not impact gameplay, and when you press a keybind button, you want the action to be immediate and not have to wait for your character's hand to reach out. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, which will look phenomenally immersive, especially when in multi-crew, seeing everybody on board physically interacting with everything, but not holding up the actual action of what you're trying to achieve because your character is reaching. Now onto the gameplay features team. This team continued to work on the tractor beam, this time focusing on escaping mechanisms, such as how shields affect the required strength of a tractor beam to secure a ship, with a prototype being built to test this and help decide whether average shield strength or per shield face determines the required strength. So quite interesting to hear this. Just like with salvaging, if your shields are up, your ship cannot be salvaged. I personally think shield strength should be the determining factor as to how effective the tractor beam will be versus per shield face, but I'm open to testing both versions and seeing what feels best. Now, a clearer direction for the expected ship engineer gameplay was defined, which involved determining the gameplay beats and planning the possible malfunctions and dangers that players will face while maintaining their ships. Now, hearing this has got me very excited. Like we see in Hard Space Shipbreaker, there are many hazards to salvaging a ship, and with Star Citizen's resource network, it should be even more in-depth and completely systemic, where interacting with the wrong bit could cause an explosion, for example. So, as an engineer, making sure you don't do more harm than good is going to be very interesting, and then how that ties into salvaging, where there are hazards and problems that could go wrong. Now, moving on to mining, it says the ongoing mining balance update progressed well, with small changes that have bigger impacts being added to the system. Unfortunately, we have no idea what these small changes are. They haven't explained it yet, so I'm itching to hear more. But for salvaging, the gameplay features help the mission teams prepare to use the mechanic in new content. And as we can see scheduled for Alpha 319, salvaging missions, well, contract brokers are coming in. And I think we talk about that a little bit more in this report. Now, for the US gameplay features team, they continued with the overall design for loading and unloading physicalized cargo, and designs for missions that leverage the new cargo systems. These were all kicked off, with it saying that the missions will also utilize the boarding actions now available with soft death, alongside the retrieval of containers or other objects of interest. So firstly, it is great to finally see missions for almost all professions and mechanics coming into the game, with mining, salvaging, cargo, but ultimately for me, cargo missions, contracts and opportunities are big news, as this allows even those with a smaller cargo hold to make money hauling goods. And I do think cargo retrieval is a great option to have, especially if it's tied into PvP, PvE content, where a freighter might suffer a soft death or even get destroyed, and then the players have to go and retrieve and gather up the boxes, either finishing the delivery job or returning the goods. Also, once loading timers are in, it's going to be a great chill style mission for just heading out on a cargo run, sipping a coffee and doing some shopping while your ship is being loaded up. Anyway, investigation and preliminary design work started on changes to ship insurance and how it works in conjunction with ship destruction, which says these changes are necessary to make towing and repairing, either at stations or in space, a better choice. Now, this is big news, and I suppose the idea is making it more viable, so financially and timely, to actually repair your ship versus claiming it on the insurance. And so ASOP insurance timers and values will likely increase, which I think was tried a while back, but due to the issues with the game at the time, it was deemed a little too early, so they reduced it again. But also the option for using the Argo SRV to tow your ship back to a space station, or potentially even a planetary repair station like this one day, to get it fixed up, having players tow it back for you, you towing it back to get it fixed rather than paying the insurance. Now, I'm not sure if they would bring this kind of gameplay in with just the current press of a button and then boop, the ship is repaired, or if they're going to use the new RMC multi-tool option, or whether they just require physical components or damage somewhat. But the fact that they are fleshing this ship maintenance and repair profession now is music to my ears, and this will be yet another career path for players to pursue and expand upon. So great news, and hopefully we get to see more on this and all of these kind of gameplay updates on sprint reports or inside Star Citizen segments soon, as I am dying to see the intended gameplay for all of these areas and just how that's going to provide more content for players. Not to mention emergent content requiring other players to help each other. Now, finally, for the gameplay features team, it says tasks were started for a change to commodities, including the location they can be bought and sold from. For example, changes to mining locations will impact the location and price for mined and refined ores at commodity brokers. So finally, we are getting updates to the economy, and it seems certain mineable commodities may only be available from certain planets or moons, or locations on a planet, and so will be worth more further afield. So for example, let's say something like aluminium, which is not really profitable right now. If that is only found on, say, Microtech's moon's Calliope, when harvested or refined, if sold to New Babbage, it will only fetch a fraction of the price that it would if maybe sold at ArcCorp, but then which in turn affects the need to haul these commodities to and from locations, creating a bit of an economic backbone. And likely, if regular commodities are required and requested from one location to another, this could create a series of trade lanes, with some being safer than others, of course, demanding these price fluctuations, and the need for protection or policing, repair, refueling, potential salvage along the way, and hauling, all again playing into the whole immersion side of things. Now this is big news, and it is finally giving a means to using all the ships for something greater than just a simple mission, but playing the economy and potentially even being able to sit on a large supply of a particular commodity to create a bit of a demand, or just acquire enough to warrant a C2 journey worth the distance. It is sounding like they are really starting to flesh out the PU now. Anyway, moving on to the mission features team, before I go off on any more tangents, progress was made on the design and prototyping of these various new missions, including salvage. As we have heard, there will be lawful, unlawful, timed missions, and lawful open contracts. For mining, a very similar process was prototyped, in which players can purchase a location of a valuable prospect, which takes you to a monitored zone and has friendly defenses to protect against hostiles, and the unlawful missions is where players maybe seize legally owned mining claims, and then there's lawless missions which takes place in unmonitored zones and can be accepted by multiple players. So again, just like the salvaging missions, offering options for everyone depending on how much you want to sort of gamble for the risk-reward balance. And for those wanting to mostly avoid danger, taking the lawful missions and likely having access to lesser value or lesser quantity commodities, but remain mostly safe and protected by the NPC ships. Unlawful missions will be where you can earn quite a lot, provided that you get the goods and get out in a timely manner. And then the open option, where there is a lot of available commodities, enough for many miners, but it is in an unmonitored zone and could see pirates or not. It could just be a lot of players going and mining. There might not be any dangers, but the potential is there. So a really nice approach, and will be interesting to see what this entails. Now, the team also developed larger mission sets for the Orison platforms, which will task players with either preventing the Ninetales gang from stealing Crusader Industry prototype parts, or stealing them for another criminal organization. So this I kind of see being a twofold thing. Firstly, building on the current Orison platform missions and expanding them in another direction, but then secondly, likely incorporating the reputation system. And as we've heard, CIG are wanting to expand the reputation to criminal organizations, and if you have a good rep with, say, the Ninetales, they will come and protect you when you are around. Or of course, if you piss them off by, say, stealing stolen goods from them and delivering them to another gang, they will come after you. So great to see more diversity to these missions coming along, which utilize more underworld gangs and criminality. Now, it also says a few other missions progressed through the design. No idea what these entail, as no details were given, but also work on Bounty Hunting version 2 and the Mission Manager updates continued. Now, personally, I am very excited to see just how the Bounty Hunting version 2 will work, and what more depth and functionality we will have for not just pursuing bounties and tracking them, but for the bounties finding clever ways to cover their tracks and elude the bounty hunters, as balance will be important here and not favouring either side outside of player skill and wit. Plus, I do know that CIG will be working on many other systems and devices for both sides to utilise. Also, it is going to be very nice to see the Mission Manager app in the mobiGlas get redone in building blocks and hopefully provide more context to all missions and just usability. And finally, for the mission features team, it says design for defending players' ships from intruders and ship-based hostility was worked on, and these features are intended to replace the simplistic hostility currently in the game, where ships remember the hostility of their last pilot or instantly turn hostile the moment a hostile player boards the ship. Now, this is a very important system that will certainly be beneficial now. having much more granularity to how ships are classed as hostile, without it being so rudimentary as you just have a criminal on board. That will be very helpful. Plus the ability to remove unwanted players on board your ship will be great. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what they have planned here, and as they expand on multi-crew, it'll be even more required than ever before. So some great new additions and missions coming along for all areas of Star Citizen's persistent universe that will heavily expand on what we have, taking many of the professions to that next level, providing more content. Plus, when there is more to do, it just creates much more immersion gameplay, where players have more missions to get on with, more things that could go wrong, requiring help from other players. This is where Star Citizen just really shines for me. Anyway, moving on to the in-game branding team in Montreal. They progressed with their work on the Lorville skyline, and then transitioned onto Invictus Launch Week, including a refresh of the DefenseCon branding, which is to be the main focus for the upcoming weeks. So I assume that this means Drake. Maybe there's some unseen Drake ships, perhaps. I know they worked on the Corsair, the Cutter, the Vulture. There is a strong chance that while they're working on Drake and fleshing out that style guide, there could be other ships and vehicles that we don't know about. The team also continued on with the brand catalogue, which is to allow all developers quick access to all the available brands and their styles. Now onto the lighting team. They made progress in several key areas, which included tidying up and bug fixing Area 18 to restore its intended appearance. So very happy to hear that, and that probably is what's tying in with the whole new player experience coming with 319, specifically to Area 18. Also, the lighting team worked on the pyro system, with lighting the interiors and exteriors of the colonial outposts and ruin station. Now, these outposts will be made up of multiple locations for all manner of occupants, from traders, farmers, settlers, and gangs. And of course, Ruin Station, if you don't know, was to be originally the main landing location in the pyro system. And this was before the law was changed to kind of have some of the planets inhabitable. So it'll be interesting to see just how significant Ruin Station is in the new pyro compared to the original, but I am almost certain it will still be very heavily influential and very dangerous, with gangs fighting over control on a regular basis. Finally, for the lighting team, they also supported the ongoing rework of the new Lorville, touching up and improving several areas around the city. So for the Montreal Live Tools team, they worked on several improvements to the local development environmental tool. Not heard of this one before, but I assume it does what it says on the tin. The team are currently finalizing the last step of implementing the entity graph tool into the network operations center. And finally, the roadmap for 2023 projects was refined, with the addition of new projects that will support server meshing. Now for the EU locations team, they also continue to work on Pyro's Ruin Station, with the team saying this is a behemoth task that the team have been diligently working on, and it looks even better day on day. So it sounds like it is still intended to be a very significant location in the PU. Glad that hasn't changed. Members of the EU Locations 2 team progressed with the local lore office and created new content alongside the mission features team. And again, this lore office is intended to serve each location as a place to hand bounties in and gain new bounty hunting missions and more. So I expect there will be lore offices at Lorville, New Babbage, Crusader, that sort of thing. The Sandbox teams further developed the colonial outposts and continued to explore and develop the underground facilities, with the team saying production is starting to ramp up and the team are feeling good about the work being done here. And finally, the Organic team spent the month reworking areas already in-game and progressed with the art benchwork for Rocky Caves. So quite a lot to digest here. Firstly, I'm so looking forward to checking out these admin offices for bounty hunting and all that they will entail. But there are so many locations now in the works, from colonialism outposts that are of course heavily featured in Pyro, but also present in Stanton, these underground facilities that are looking insane. And it's going to be so exciting to see these come to fruition and just see what variations there are going to be, from corporate to private, even abandoned. I can imagine exploring an abandoned underground facility the size of that Bearing building that we have seen in the works. That is going to be very cool. But then finally, it has also been said that they are going to improve on the current rocky caves with the new techniques that they've learned from the sandy caves, which are definitely much better. And so that will also be a very nice update when it comes. So great stuff from the locations teams as always. Now onto the narrative team. They worked alongside design to start scripting upcoming mining and salvaging missions, and continued to develop stories for the first batch of investigation missions. Interesting, they refer to it as the first batch, meaning there will likely be a second at the least, potentially multiple batches. The environment and design teams provided updates on new locations that will start appearing in the game to support bounty hunting, with narrative working closely to ensure that these areas align with existing lore and gameplay expectations. So, aside from bounty offices, I do wonder if they're referring here to more locations specific to bounty hunting, unless they are specifically referring to just multiple bounty admin offices for each planet. We'll have to wait and see there. Now, planning from the narrative team was undertaken for the year ahead. This included building a comprehensive resource listing all the various organizations and NPCs and what mission content they offer, and this will help to provide a single source for the team to reference when coming up with new missions. They are also planning to look at all the current mission givers, as well as prototype simple story-based missions that could be placed around the various landing zones to provide additional content. You know, what I'm really hoping to see are kind of simple missions, nothing overly in-depth, just very simple, like day-to-day bread-and-butter missions, where people are requesting, like, 10 Heart of the Woods, please go and find me 10 Heart of the Woods and bring them back to me. It'd be interesting to see what they work out here, but even just something as simple as what we had in things like Skyrim and Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls, where it would go and kill 10 rats or what, you know, those sort of easy-going missions that can bring you a little bit of money here and there around landing zones without needing to go anywhere. So, onto the Montreal Online Services team. They also planned the year ahead, discussing server meshing with the networking team, with the main goal being to achieve a technical design consensus and division of responsibilities between the teams in order to deliver the feature. And the following week, Online Services further defined the tasks needed to achieve server meshing Tier 0. I really hope that they can get this done super quick. Now, moving on to the ship tech art and animation team, they progressed with the Hull C, working on the animation and state setup for the ship's expanded cargo mode. Tech animation and damage support was provided for several ships in the pipeline, and all ships were reviewed alongside QA to ensure that relevant component attachment can take damage. So great to hear that. This is all part of getting physical components in ships and utilizing the resource network, and will provide a major change up to ships and ship combat specifically, having ships behave realistically and systemically based on the damage to each component. For the UI team, they helped with the Squadron 42 StarMap, which will eventually make its way into the persistent universe, with the current focus on adding navigation aids such as grids and coordinates, improving the sizing of planets and markers, and adding visual polish. So big news here, great to hear that it's going to get coordinates and grids to help with planetary navigation. That is going to be a massive help when it does come along. And of course, for Squadron 42 first, then the PU. But the fact that they're adding visual polish means that the majority of the functionality is in and working, and they're just sprucing it up to look visually pleasing. So I really hope that they can show this off as soon as possible, as I am dying to see what it's going to look like, and how it will function, and what we can do with it. And then finally we have the visual effects team. They carried out several CPU to GPU particle library conversions, starting with vehicles, and finally pre-production began on some new locations, including a huge underground facility and rock caves. Now I'm assuming visual effects here are working on these to add VFX to the locations, but I guess this huge underground facility could be the one that is being worked on in the Pyro system, but I don't know. So there it is. That is the monthly report broken down. A huge amount of content coming along, from missions to locations, stability with the engine and Pyro system. Things are really ramping up now in all areas of the game, and with a push to get server meshing in, this continued upscaling of progress will only increase. Big things are coming, and this year I feel is really set to be quite a momentous year for Star Citizen and the Persistent Universe, and I cannot wait to watch it all unfold. But with that said, if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. Come and hang out over at twitch.tv/supermacbrother. You are all more than welcome over there. Hopefully streaming Thursday, Friday, 2R5, playing some 318, which is now open Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind, it does the channel a big favour. Tick that notification bell if you would like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons and channel members. Thank you guys so much for all the support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.